And now to introduce our keynote, we have our Executive Vice President, Shane Strickland.
So hey, as Paul said, I'm the Colonel Shane Strickland, Executive Vice President AFCEA. I'm here on leave today. I'm also a member of the Georgia Army National Guard. So it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Major General Thomas Carden, the 43rd Adjutant General of the Georgia Department of Defense. He's in charge of the Army Guard, the Air Guard, the State Defense Force, and other civilian federal employees that work on behalf of the Georgia Department of Defense. So at this time, and he's also my senior raider. So let's give him a warm round of applause for Major General Carden.
Thanks. Okay. All right, so a moving target's harder to hit. You got 30 minutes of your life, you're never getting back, so we're going to go fast, leave some time for questions. And so I'm used to being in a room full of people that are smarter than me, and today is no exception. So it's an honor to be the senior servant in the Georgia National Guard. It's an honor to be in the same room with y'all. Thanks for what you do every day to make everybody just a little bit more, a little bit safer, a little bit more effective in terms of doing the job. Okay, so we got two missions. We got a federal mission, we got a state mission. So when we do the federal mission, that's the war fight. That's the bread and butter of the Georgia National Guard, right? So I get about $11 million from the state of Georgia, follow the money. About half of that goes to run two youth challenge programs. One at Fort Gordon, one at Fort Stewart, second chance program for young people. All right? About $600 million of my budget goes to the federal war fight. So we are the primary combat reserve of the United States Army and the United States Air Force. Everything else is a side gig. Now, we got two chains of command that goes along with that. We got 11,400 in the Army Guard, about 3,000 in the Air Guard, about 500 in our all-volunteer State Defense Force. We got about 652 state employees. About 11 of those employees are funded by the state. All the rest of them have some type of federal match. So again, the federal government got a big stake in the Georgia National Guard. If you read the news, you would think that we're primarily focused on Homeland Defense and Homeland Security. And while that's a very important part of our mission, our primary mission is fighting the away game. The only reason I'm putting this slide up about how the Army Guard is arrayed, there's 159 counties in the state of Georgia. We got about 63 facilities located across the state. So in your world, think COOP sites. And they're deployed all over the state. And so we've got lots of resiliency, lots of redundancy in terms of just infrastructure. And there's communications infrastructure associated with the brick and mortar. Air National Guard, big stake. And we've actually got more cyber in the Air Guard than we do in the Army Guard, although about every Air Guard's MOS involved in comms is referred to as cyber because they train that way in the Air Force. I think we in the Army probably got some lessons we can learn from the United States Air Force in that regard. The United States Air Force can do communications-wise in two suitcases what it takes the Army to do in two semi-trucks. If you look down on the bottom of that slide, and yep, it's on your left. I'm looking at this thing. I'm trying to make sure I'm oriented here. That's the Joint Stars airplane. It's an ISR platform. It can fly over your house and tell you what you had for breakfast. It's down in Warner Robins. That's transitioning to the Advanced Battle Management System. And why is that important to you? Is there's going to be a huge reliance on cybersecurity when it comes to all things. It is today and even more going into the future because there's three layers to that thing. And I'm not telling you anything that's not open source, right? There's a layer in space. There's a middle layer that's got humans and airplanes, and then we got some airplanes without flesh and blood in them these days. And then you've got the ground layer. And that the center of gravity of that thing, the brick and mortar for it, is going to be at Warner Robins Air Force Base, and the 116th Air Control Wing is going to morph into that mission set. And then we got C-130s down in Savannah. Georgia State Defense Force volunteers in the truest sense of the word. They are essentially deployed all over the state. They're not cheap, they're free. They're your neighbors, and they do a lot of great things for us. Now, we've got a lot of cyber talent resident in the State Defense Force. Now, legally, because of the many obstacles that we have and access to networks and you name the red tape and bureaucracy, we can't always leverage that to its full potential. But we have a lot of capability because those folks are working out in industry with you day in and day out. So you know us in this slide, right? You know us in terms of responding to hurricanes. We go drag trees out of the road, okay? so that we open up those physical lines of communication so that power companies can get in, restring your power lines, toilets start flushing again, restaurants open, and business can get back to normal. So we're very happy to do that. It's an important part of our mission set, particularly from the 1st of June, always around Labor Day. If you wonder when, don't book a cruise on Labor Day. All right, that's my advice to you, right? There's always something spinning off the coast of North Africa coming this way in the Atlantic around Labor Day. I rarely spend a Labor Day without watching the Weather Channel or dragging trees out of the road. So we spend a lot of time doing that. Winter storms, y'all remember Snowmageddon? Right, we got a little piece of that. You're welcome. Okay, so we do those kinds of things. This is why I'm here today, right? And we talk about interagency partnerships. I'm an intergovernmental academic partnerships and partnerships with industry. And quite frankly, we are terrible at it. So when an organization like this, Paul Wirtz, Shane Strickland, AFCEA, this apparatus, when you all say, hey, come talk to us about the Guard, or hey, we want to come out to your headquarters and see what you do, I never say no. I never say, I may not be able to do it the day you want to do it, but I will make time for you. I will make time for industry because I think, emergencies are forcing functions, right? They're forcing functions. They make us do things. Churchill had a good quote. Churchill said, Americans will always do the right thing as soon as we explore every other option. And so the crisis is the ultimate forcing function. So we got to build these partnerships. We have to learn from you. And I'll tell you a little story here toward the end about how we learned from industry so many times and learned from academia and learned from people that don't wear the uniform. We operate in a very hierarchical world. How many veterans we got in the room? Hey, thanks for your service. So you all know what a line and block chart looks like because you've lived inside one, right? So the problem is that is a little bit of a limiting factor for us. We are not always structured to learn and partner because we got rules and we got policies and we got processes that sometimes get in the way, and they're all well-intended and they're all there probably for all the right reasons, but we got to think different because as the general just told us, we're fighting a different kind of enemy. There's a different kind of weapons. There's different kind of tools, and we got to think different. Okay, so you are what your results say you are. And so this busy slide just talks about the pandemic response, right? COVID-19 shows up. March 2nd, we had our first 2 cases, and it ballooned pretty quickly from there. And to be frank with you, the largest medical unit the Georgia National Guard had was deployed in Iraq. Okay, I had nothing on my books, right? Nothing on my TDA, nothing on my MTO, right? That said, hey, this is perfectly designed for the once-in-a-100-year global pandemic. And you know what? It's very similar to what we're dealing with in terms of cyber warfare today and AI and machine learning. We don't have perfect structures to fight this, and we didn't have perfect structures to fight this. And so the first day I stood up in our command post and I said something I never said before. Take your TDA, take your MTO, and take it to the nearest shredder. Okay, we're going to bend what we have around this crisis. Because if we wait for this crisis to come to us, we are going to be late to need, and we're going to fail the citizens of Georgia, and by extension, citizens of the United States of America. We will not fail. We will not fail. Because we're not going to wait for this thing to come to us. And so there's no such thing as a quote-unquote medical support team in the Georgia National Guard. There is no such thing as an infection control team that went to 2,400 primarily long-term care facilities and did everything from fogging to wiping down doorknobs to wiping down tables to mopping floors to doing everything that we could to make sure that the most vulnerable among us did not die to this pandemic. Now, I can't tell you how many lives we saved, but I can't tell you how many lives the seatbelt saves either, but I know we don't unbuckle many dead people. Okay? So these are what results look like. We went to food banks because all the volunteers in food banks were generally in a risk category, and we're still in food banks today. We went out and augmented vaccination sites across this state. We helped cruise ship passengers that got evacuated off a Grand Princess cruise in California. They put them out on Dobbins, put a fence around them, put FBI agents around them armed, and said, you can't leave. Governors from states wouldn't take their own people back. And we put them in there without their medication. We put them in there without their toothbrushes or soap or anything else. And then we helped them. We went to the community. We reached out to everybody that we could, and we made sure those folks got what they needed. Never, ever, ever did we ever think we'd be doing that kind of humanitarian relief on American soil. But this is kind of our scoreboard, right? Because at the end of the day, in the win-loss column, it's all about putting it in the W, right? We want to win because when we win, Georgians win, Americans win. Okay. And then, COVID season was in full swing. And then riot season broke out. All right. So I'm glad to be in downtown Atlanta today without a helmet on. All right. So 29th of May, the first day I left my headquarters before 2000 at night, it wasn't dark and I was going home. And I remember thinking when I was driving out, I said, man, this is a great day. I'm getting to leave the headquarters and it's still daylight outside. I got home, I turned on Channel 2 and I saw the smoke billowing out of the back of the first police car. I called the governor and I said, sir, it takes more than a minute to get a Minuteman, just so you know. If you need us, and he said, hey, you need to come down here. So we put about 1,385 soldiers in Centennial Olympic Park and took what was a riot, right? Not protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, by the way. All right, and we turned it into and set the conditions for peaceful expressions of ideas that's absolutely protected under the First Amendment. You are what your results say you are. Did not have to put our hands on one American citizen. All right, and that's because we created conditions, right, for peaceful expression of ideas. You are what your results say you are. Okay, we got a counter-drug task force in the Georgia National Guard. We don't talk about this very much in public. For any members of the media present, I appreciate it. It's not classified, but I want to keep these people safe. But we take drugs, illicit weapons off the streets, and we work very hard in this task force to keep our streets safe. We have a cyber protection team right up in your wheelhouse. So I don't know what it is about our Independence Day, July 4th. That seems to be the focal point for when particularly government agencies, at least the last 2 years, have been attacked with ransomware. So 2 years ago, 2019, right around July 4th, I started getting calls about the administrative offices of the court, followed very rapidly about a call about Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and then followed very closely about the Georgia Department of Public Safety, as you know, is the Georgia State Patrol getting hacked. So for the first time in 20 years, the Georgia State Patrol had to learn how to write paper tickets. Okay, so if you got a warning during that period, it's probably because they didn't know how to write you a ticket, and I was not angry about that. But I will tell you, this past year we saw it again. We saw a little bit more around the 4th of July. One particular county that I can think of got hit. They called out the state did through emergency management, called out our cyber protection team. Their E911 system was out. All right. So we went in about 8:30 that Saturday morning, and by 10:00, that E911 system was back up and running. So this team is very, very good. They're on the leading edge of their, I think, third deployment since we've had them. And Sam Blaney, who's sitting in the room right here, was pivotal in starting that team and getting it where it is today. And Sam, I just want to tell you publicly how much I appreciate your leadership in putting that team together. I mean, you all just did some amazing work, and today that team is an extension of your investment in them, and we're very proud of what they do. FEMA Region 4 Homeland Response Force, your illustrious Vice President, Shane Strickland, is the commander of the 201st Regional Support Group, and it is the resident or the home of our Homeland Response Force. Obviously, this slide's real busy. This just goes to show you how hard it is to communicate. So I told the team, I said, hey, check it out. I got to go give this brief to AFCEA tomorrow. How about just give me one slide, basic stuff, maybe your mission statement, just a couple of bullets on what you do, and they gave me this, which is essentially their entire command brief condensed on one slide. Shane, thanks. It's awesome. If y'all got questions about this slide, ask Shane Strickland, because I don't know that, generals are generalists by definition. They gave me a lot more information about the Homeland Response Force than I could ever explain in the time available. But essentially, this is a capability that's focused, you can see, primarily on chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological, explosive type situations. But we have been agile. We have bent this formation around whatever the crisis was. We don't restrict ourselves by what's in our TDA or what we train to. What we train to is a point. It's like an operations order or a plan, right? It's a point from which to depart when you got a crisis. It should not restrict you. So there's lots of capability on this team to help us in the homeland. They're supposed to be out the door pretty quick, first elements of which within 6 hours. So it takes more than a minute to get a Minuteman, but that's pretty quick from pulling a lot of people off their civilian jobs. 4 civil support team. So I'll give you a little vignette here on the CST. So I was the commanding general of the Georgia Army Guard. This is my first GO assignment. And I got a call one day from the Centers for Disease Control, or somebody telling me they were from the CDC, and they said, we have a white powder envelope at the CDC, and we need you to send a 4CST out here to diagnose it, tell us what it is. And I said, hold up. You're from the Centers for Disease Control, and you're calling the Georgia National Guard about a white powder envelope? We are in trouble. I didn't believe him. I thought it was a hoax. I said, tell me who you are, tell me what your phone number is, and I'm going to call you back. So I called back, same number, Centers for Disease Control, Emergency Operations Center, and I said, hey, you were the guy I just talked to? And he goes, yes, sir. I said, all right, stay right there. I'll call you back. So now I called over to CST. I don't know, Shane, I think, may have been commanding the thing at the time. And I said, hey, do you guys really do this? He goes, oh, yeah, we go out there all the time. So that's how, and I was really surprised, and I learned something that day, but it just tells you how good the 4CST is at going out and dealing with those kind of things. So obviously, very proud of it. Proud of what they do every day. You may have heard of some folks up in the mountains a couple of years ago making ricin and making jelly, and then they were going to give it to African-American churches in the mountains trying to kill people that didn't look like them, right? We helped put those people in jail. We helped put those people in jail with the 4CST. Couldn't be more proud of what they did. They helped save lives and, again, put evil people behind bars where they belong. Okay, so border security is national security, right? So a lot of people think this issue at the border is brand new. This is a picture of Georgia National Guard Field Hospital number 1 on the Mexican border in 1917. So just so you know, it's not a new problem. All right, so that's kind of the long and short of the Georgia Guard. But let me just talk to you a little bit about how crisis is a forcing function. So we started out the pandemic, and I think this was probably one of my first conference calls. Right, we're getting used to, having to deal with things remotely, and I'm trying to figure out. I got a headquarters full of people. They're in an emergency response mode, and I'm thinking, hey, what if somebody in this building gets sick? What if somebody goes, and then we got to quarantine the whole building? So I figured out how to get essential people to, everybody's essential, right? It's just not always essential that you do your work at the office. You may be able to do it somewhere else. So we don't have any non-essential employees, but I actually needed people to come to work. There's some people I didn't need to come to work, and believe it or not, in our business, it was hard for me to run people off. So I figured it out because I'm slow. I said, all right, check it out. Everybody here that we got to have to make this thing happen, bring 14 days worth of clothes in your suitcase tomorrow. Because if somebody gets sick here, we got showers here, right? We'll bring food into here. If you get too sick to work, we'll cart you out in an ambulance. But we can't afford to, if somebody gets sick, I can't afford to send this headquarters home, right? You got to have some sort of redundancy. You got to have some resiliency built into your system. So real quick, I got down to, I didn't even have to tell anybody who needed to stay and who needed to go. They figured it out on their own. As soon as that whole suitcase rule came out, you saw some people leaving the parking lot in a hurry because they didn't want to live with me for 14 days, and I don't blame them. But it was other issues. That first conference call, I know Shane will remember this. So we had the first conference call, and then we had way more people calling in than we used to. And so people started falling off. Shane's guys were sitting back there, and I kept looking at them, and people were dialing back in, and people were calling on the cell phone going, hey. So finally, I said, what the heck's going on? I cleaned that up. They said, sir, I said, we can only get 50 people on there at a time. So one of my guys in the State Defense Force that was on the call, he's a G3, runs a pest control business down in Albany, Georgia. He spoke up quickly, and he said, hey, sir, my pest control business, my conference call bridge down here in Albany, we can support 100. I can host it from here. And so I turned to we measure ice crystals on other planets, right? And we do soil samples on Mars. Right? But I turned to my folks and I said, hey, check it out. If I got to host my DOD conference call, I have a pest control agency in Albany, Georgia. Some folks ain't going to have a job tomorrow. All right? We can't operate like this. And it's amazing how quickly, what we get up to, like 150 or something. I mean, we got the biggest conference bridge in the state. But we would have never had it. We would have never had it had it been up to DISA. And I'm not trashing DISA. I mean, it's just, we're in a rules-based system. We're not in an agile system. We're in a system that if I want to figure out how to get it in my own computer, right? Was it uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and 2 partridges in a pear tree, right? Right. I got to call somebody, because I grew up before the Kardashians, right? I grew up before Tic Tac and InstaFlash and MySpace and Spacegram and all that stuff. So I got to call somebody out of the basement. He comes up there and logs me into the computer, and we just got to get better. We've got to figure out how to get better, and we got to figure out how to get agile. The systems that we have essentially lack redundance. They absolutely lack redundance. They lack a user interface, a secure user interface that deals with the humans. I guarantee you all of you can figure out how to get in my computer without my help, and you can probably do it without my cat card. Okay? Y'all are that good. But I want you to look around this room. There's not many of you. And we're not going to be able to grow enough of you to do what we need to do. So we're going to have to figure out how to come up with in my humble opinion, we're going to have to come up with systems-based solutions because we're never going to build enough humans that are going to move as fast as the machines are moving. And I see it every single day from solar winds, okay, that touched us a little bit, okay, to the Colonial Pipeline. And it has such a downstream effect in ways that you all wouldn't even imagine. I mean, I get calls, when Colonial Pipeline went down, I got calls for truck drivers. They said, well, we can't move it on pipelines, and, can you give us truck drivers to start? And so we're solving symptoms. That ain't the problem. That ain't the problem. Having truck drivers ain't the problem. We may be able to solve this little bit of an issue right now if we just truck more fuel. But we got to figure out, it ain't like we didn't see it coming. The water plant, the gas pipeline, the electrical grid, you name it. Anything that we use, mass produce, depend on every day, that's what our adversary is going out of. And I pray that the best and the brightest that's in this room will get after it and figure out how to kill it and eat it for us, right? Because we need you. I mean, y'all are smart. I'm just honored to be in the room, ready to take your questions. We got you close to back on time. Yes, sir.
Your CPT, you mentioned CyberDog and CyberShield.
Yes, sir.
So how does the training for CPT, how does that happen? Only in the exercises and okay, now you got to start doing it? Or do you have, since they have limited time in order to do the drill actively, how does that training happen? Or is that done at the pest control center?
Well, the CPT is an interesting model because just about every one of those people, with rare exception, and Sam Blaney can give you a lot better answer to that question than I can. But what I've seen as a novice, right, just essentially peripherally, I'm an infantryman. I jump out of planes for a reason. My GT scores weren't very high. But they do this stuff in their day job. And what was interesting, I think I may have mentioned this to somebody before we came in here, is I visited them and at one of their deployments, and their employers were there. And it was their employers were, employing them to do cyber protection out in the civilian world, and they were paying these soldiers their full salary while they were deployed. And so I pulled one of the employers to the side, and I said, okay, I grew up on a peanut farm in South Georgia. I'm slow. Tell me why you're paying this guy. And they said, well, we don't know what they're doing behind the fence at Fort Meade, but we're guessing they're probably getting after this in an offensive capacity. And they're going to bring some skill sets back to my business. It's going to be highly competitive. People are going to be competing for it. And I want to secure this talent, this human capital. And I want for this soldier to come back to work for my company when they finish their deployment. And so they're getting ready to deploy again. Now, if I say that wrong, Sam, is that? They get it. So it's real cross-training. They get a little bit with us through exercises and toolkits that they can't use out in the civilian world, but also they're out there fighting a cyber war every single day in their business world. So it's really, I didn't think we'd be able to man the thing. DOD was like, well, we're going to spend all this money, we're going to train all these people, and they're going to go to work for six figures for Truist and AT&T and you name it. And that, I haven't looked at the turnover like in the numbers today, but our turnover on that cyber protection team has not been near what I thought it would be. It's been pretty small. I would tell you that my average infantry unit's probably got more turnover than that cyber protection team does. So they do great work, and I think they bridge the gap. If you need more details, the real answer, Sam can get you. Yes, sir. Come on. Well, you know, Georgia doesn't have a space force right now. What he asked about was, did Georgia have a space force, or what's going on with the space force? Great question. So we're not there yet, but I will tell you the Advanced Battle Management System, and what I mentioned earlier, that our 116th Air Control Wing is going to be involved with that down at Warner Robins Air Force Base. I would not at all be surprised, because ABMS puts us in space by default. So great question. So I aspire to make a business case to be part of that in the future. And probably every other adjutant general in the country would love to be part of it. So, but I think we got nose position there, right?
Sir, I think we have time for one more. The last question.
Yes, ma'am, in the back. Yes, ma'am.
And we have soldiers, coming back and everything, needing services. We can facilitate that. And what we're really trying to do now is to get businesses, particularly in North Atlanta, where most of them are, to see the soldier skill set. Like cybersecurity is, you get certifications, military give a lot of them that, and that's good to go. It's the other skills sets that are not so easy, even with infantry and the special systems. So have you seen like jobs doing the same thing these other cybersecurity and technology companies are doing? I'm actually interested in that because, we hear one thing, but it's a different story when you go inside.
I will tell you that the question was, in case you didn't hear it, a lady was talking about veterans coming back and employment opportunities across the spectrum, cyber, and even outside of cyber. I will tell you, what I see is employers call me. If they get my number, they'll call me direct. And they are begging for veterans to come to work. And so it's a matter of linking. Now, the Warrior Alliance is a good hub and spoke in Atlanta. It's very, well supported in Atlanta, the Warrior Alliance is, and they have been, somebody calls the Warrior Alliance a veteran and they have a job skill set, my experience is they will push that out to the different employers. But I'd love to talk to you after this just to make sure if there's any missing link in there and taking care of our veterans and putting those skill sets to work in our communities. That's a win-win because you as American taxpayers have already paid for those skill sets, and we ought to be harvesting them out there in industry. So if there's a veteran out there that's unemployed or underemployed that has a skill set, wants to go to work, there's going to be a place for them. You bet. Okay, you bet. All right, well, hey, I can't thank you all enough for letting me come in the room today. I'm inspired just to be in the room with you and just very much appreciate every one of you. All right.